phones rang, tickets sold, and boom, it was sold out on Wednesday night just like that.
2,800 seats. That was the court Alex Eala was originally supposed to play on at the National Bank Open in Toronto. Instead, tournament officials moved her to a stadium that holds more than 10,000 spectators. Think about that for a moment. Not because she was the defending champion, not because she was the world #1, not because she had won multiple Grand Slams. She was a 21-year-old, fresh off the biggest week of her career, still outside the tour's traditional group of superstars. So why would one of the biggest tournaments on the WTA calendar completely change its court assignment for a player who, by normal scheduling standards, wasn't even supposed to be there? To answer that question, you first have to understand how these tournaments normally work. Every WTA 1000 event follows a fairly predictable system. The biggest names play on center court. Top-ranked players receive the primetime sessions. The next group fills the show courts. Everyone else is scheduled according to ranking, expected demand, television requirements, and the tournament's daily flow. It's a system designed to avoid surprises. By that logic, Alex Eala's second-round match belonged on grandstand court. With roughly 2,800 seats, it isn't a small venue. In fact, at most tournaments, it would be considered one of the main stages. On paper, it was exactly where a player in Alex's position should have been scheduled. Then something happened that no scheduling model could predict. As soon as the order of play was released, ticket demand exploded. Fans weren't simply buying seats. They were buying them faster than the tournament had expected.
Our stadium is 10,077 seats.
Suddenly, the problem wasn't where Alex was scheduled to play. The problem was that the scheduled court simply wasn't big enough. Tournament director Carl Hale explained it better than anyone else. Speaking about the decision, he admitted that grandstand was no longer an option because Alex had probably sold upwards of 5,000 tickets. 5,000 for a match originally assigned to a court that couldn't even hold 3,000 people. At that point, there wasn't much of a decision left to make. Toronto moved the match to center court. A stadium built for more than 10,000 fans. Notice what didn't happen. The tournament didn't move Alex because of her ranking. It didn't move her because of media pressure. It didn't move her because of a special request from her team. It moved her because the numbers made every other option impossible. That's what makes this story so remarkable. Professional tennis has always assumed that rankings determine demand. Toronto discovered that demand sometimes arrives first. The ranking simply catches up later. And that's why this story is much bigger than one court assignment. Because Toronto didn't change the court because Alex Eala asked. Toronto changed the court because the fans did. The decision Toronto made wasn't unusual because Alex Eala had become a better player. It was unusual because the tournament's normal planning model suddenly stopped working. Every major tennis tournament follows roughly the same process. First come the rankings. The rankings determine which players are expected to draw the largest audiences. Those players receive the biggest courts. The biggest courts receive the television cameras. Television attracts the largest crowds. For decades, that sequence has been remarkably reliable. Ranking, then court assignment, then television, then crowds. It's efficient, it's logical, and most weeks, it's exactly how the sport operates. Alex Eala quietly turned that entire sequence upside down. In Toronto, the crowds appeared before the schedule had a chance to adjust. Ticket demand exploded. The tournament reacted. Only then did the court assignment change. This time, the order looked completely different. Crowds then, ticket demand, then court assignment. And only after that did anyone stop to look at the ranking beside Alex's name. That's why this story has attracted so much attention inside tennis. It isn't simply about one popular player. It's about a scheduling model encountering something it wasn't designed to measure. The strongest evidence comes directly from the people making those decisions. Tournament director Carl Hale didn't announce the move as a publicity stunt. He explained it as a practical necessity. Grandstand court, with its approximately 2,800 seats, simply could not handle the demand. According to Hale, Alex had probably sold upwards of 5,000 tickets. That's almost double the capacity of the court originally assigned to her. The tournament wasn't trying to create excitement. The excitement already existed. Toronto was simply trying to fit it inside the right stadium. The speed of that demand made the story even more remarkable, according to CBC. Once the Wednesday night session featuring Alex Eala was announced, tickets disappeared in roughly 30 minutes. 30 minutes. That doesn't happen because people casually decide to attend after dinner. It happens because thousands of fans are already waiting. They already know the draw. They already know the schedule will be released. They already know which match they want. All they're waiting for is the moment tickets become available. That's prepared demand. And prepared demand is far more powerful than spontaneous popularity. Carl Hale admitted something else that may prove even more significant. He revealed that tournament directors across the tour had started talking about it. Not fans, not journalists. Tournament directors, the people responsible for court assignments, scheduling, ticket sales, television production, and daily operations, were suddenly discussing the same player because if Toronto had been forced to rethink its schedule, what would happen in Cincinnati? What about the US Open? Could the same thing happen again? Former world number one Andy Roddick also described what he was seeing from a completely different perspective. He called the phenomenon Eala mania and pointed to something few players ever experience. Watch parties filling arenas back in the Philippines for matches taking place thousands of miles away. When tournament directors and former players begin describing the same trend independently, it becomes difficult to dismiss it as social media excitement. It starts looking like a structural change. There's another reason Toronto became the perfect place for that change to appear. Scheduling models understand rankings. They understand television windows. They understand court capacity. They understand historical attendance, but they don't understand communities. No scheduling software calculates how many Filipino Canadians live around Toronto. It doesn't estimate how many families have been waiting months to watch the first Filipino WTA. Champion compete in person. It doesn't predict organized fan groups buying tickets together the moment the order of play appears. Those variables don't exist inside the model. Toronto exposed that blind spot. Washington had already proven Alex could attract extraordinary attention, but Washington could still be explained away as excitement surrounding a breakthrough week. Toronto was different. Washington created confidence. Toronto created confirmation. It became the first tournament forced to change its own plans because that confidence had already become demand. And that's why this story reaches far beyond one sold-out night session. For the first time, the tournament wasn't telling fans where Alex Eala would play. The fans were telling the tournament, Toronto may become the first tournament that had to adjust. It almost certainly won't be the last. Because once a tournament discovers that one player can change ticket demand overnight, every tournament that follows starts paying attention. The calendar moves quickly from here. Cincinnati is next. Then comes the US Open, the biggest hard-court event in the world, where every scheduling decision is magnified under the lights of Arthur Ashe Stadium. That makes Toronto more than an isolated story. It becomes a case study. Tournament directors don't simply decide where players compete. They decide which matches receive the biggest television audiences, which sessions become primetime attractions, which sponsors receive maximum exposure, which storylines dominate the broadcast. Those decisions have always been influenced by rankings. Now another factor is becoming impossible to ignore. Demand. If one player consistently fills larger stadiums, creates waiting lists, sells out sessions, and generates extraordinary interest before the first ball is struck, that player naturally becomes part of every scheduling discussion. Not because the rankings no longer matter, they always will. But because tournaments exist to put the biggest audience in the biggest seats, Toronto may be the first event to publicly acknowledge that reality. Then came another important piece of evidence. Alex didn't simply receive the spotlight, she justified it. After moving to center court, she defeated Alyssa Parks in straight sets, turning what could have been an uncomfortable moment into another convincing performance. That matters, because hype without results fades quickly. Results backed by growing demand become something much harder to dismiss. Washington made people curious. Toronto proved the curiosity wasn't disappearing. One sold-out session can still be explained as extraordinary timing. 2 starts becoming evidence. 3 begins changing how tournaments plan their biggest stages. That's why this story was never really about moving one match from grandstand to center court. The court assignment was simply the visible consequence. The real story was what forced it to happen. A scheduling model built around rankings encountered something it had never fully accounted for, an audience that was already making its own decisions. And if that pattern continues through Cincinnati and into New York, the conversation will only grow louder. Because for years, tournaments decided which players deserve the biggest stages. Toronto may become the weak tennis, realize the biggest stages are ultimately chosen by the people buying the tickets. Do you think this was a one-week phenomenon? Or is Alex Eala becoming one of the biggest draws in women's tennis? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoy in-depth tennis documentaries like this, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter as Alex Eala's story continues through Cincinnati and the US Open.